Blood on a linoleum floor usually means just another Friday night at Chicago's Rush Memorial Trauma Center, but the blood seeping from the young girl in a torn Prada coat wasn't ordinary. When Clara Higgins stopped the bleeding, she didn't know she had just incurred a debt with the city's deadliest predator. The digital clock on the wall of Trauma Room 3 blinked to 14 a.m. Clara Higgins pressed the heel of her hand against her burning eyes, desperately trying to blink away the exhaustion of a double shift. Outside, the brutal Chicago wind whipped rain against the reinforced glass of Rush University Medical Center, a fitting soundtrack for the chaos that usually flooded through the emergency room doors. But tonight had been eerily quiet, the kind of quiet veteran nurses, like Clara knew better than to trust. The silence shattered with the shrieking of tires on wet asphalt. Clara looked up just in time to see the automatic doors blow open. Two men in soaking wet, charcoal grey suits burst into the triage area. They weren't paramedics. They were built like linebackers, their faces grim and pale under the harsh fluorescent lights. Between them, suspended by her arms, was a young woman. Her head lolled forward, dark hair cascading over a pale pink cashmere Prada coat that was rapidly turning a sickening, slick crimson. "We need a doctor! Now!" the taller of the two men roared, his hand instinctively hovering near the lapel of his suit. Clara's trained eye caught the distinct, heavy bulge of a shoulder holster. Protocol dictated that Clara hit the panic button under the desk to summon hospital security when armed individuals entered the premises. But as the men laid the girl on the nearest gurney, Clara saw the victim's face. She couldn't have been older than 19. Her skin was the color of skim milk, her lips tinged with the fatal blue of severe oxygen deprivation. Out of the way, Clara ordered, her fatigue vanishing instantly, replaced by the icy adrenaline of trauma care. She shoved past the armed men, not caring who they were. What happened? Drive by on the Dan Ryan Expressway, the shorter man grunted, his hands trembling as he backed away. She took one to the chest. Maybe the shoulder. Just fix her. Clara grabbed a pair of trauma shears and sliced through the ruined cashmere and the silk blouse beneath it. The wound was a jagged hole just below the right clavicle. Sucking chest wound. The girl was drowning in her own blood, and air was filling the pleural cavity, crushing her lung. "I need a crash cart, a 1-4, gauge needle, and a chest tube kit." "Stat!" Clara barked at a terrified junior nurse who had frozen in the doorway. "Page doctor. Harrison, tell him we have a tension pneumothorax." There was no time to wait for the attending physician. The girl's chest heaved in a horrific, unnatural rhythm, her trachea deviating visibly to the left. Clara didn't hesitate. She swabbed the second intercostal space with betadine, uncapped the heavy-duty angiocatheter, and plunged it into the girl's chest. A sharp hiss of escaping air followed, and the girl's violent gasping immediately eased. "You did it," one of the suited men breathed, wiping rain and sweat from his forehead. "I bought her 10 minutes, Clara corrected sharply, applying a specialized occlusive dressing over the needle. As she pressed the adhesive down, her fingers brushed against a heavy, custom-made platinum necklace resting against the girl's collarbone. It bore a crest, a wolf entangled in thorns. It felt heavy, cold, and ancient. "If we don't get a chest tube in and stop the internal bleeding, she'll code before the surgeon gets his gloves on." By the time Dr. Harrison finally sprinted into the room, Clara had already prepped the surgical tray, established 2 large-bore IVs, and started pushing O-negative blood. The ER erupted into a synchronized ballet of controlled panic as they wheeled the girl into the emergency surgical suite. For the next 4 hours, Clara stood elbow to elbow with the surgical team, passing clamps, monitoring vitals, and watching as Dr. Harrison meticulously repaired a shredded subclavian artery. It was a miracle the bullet hadn't clipped the aorta. When the monitors finally settled into a steady, rhythmic beeping, Clara stepped back, her scrubs soaked in sweat and the stranger's blood. "Good catch, Higgins," Dr. Harrison mumbled through his mask, snapping his gloves off. 5 more minutes out there, and she would have been dead. "Do we have a name yet?" "No ID," Clara said softly, looking at the girl's pale, peaceful face. "Just a necklace." Clara escorted the unconscious girl to a private room in the intensive care unit. The 2 suited men had vanished, leaving behind nothing but a puddle of rainwater in the waiting room. Exhausted, Clara sank into the vinyl chair beside the girl's bed. She should have gone home. Her shift had ended 2 hours ago. But something about the young woman, a vulnerability that contrasted so sharply with the violent men who had dropped her off, kept Clara anchored to the spot. She pulled out her phone and checked her bank account balance. $42.18. A knot tightened in her stomach. Tomorrow, the $4,500 monthly bill for her mother's memory care unit at Sunrise Senior Living in Lincoln Park was due. Clara was drowning, working herself to the bone, picking up every available shift, and it still wasn't enough. She closed her eyes, just for a second. When she opened them, the temperature in the room seemed to have plummeted 10 degrees. Standing at the foot of the bed was a man who looked like he had been carved from obsidian and ice. He wore a bespoke, midnight blue Brioni suit that fit his broad shoulders with lethal precision. His dark hair was immaculately styled, but it was his eyes that made the breath catch in Clara's throat. They were a piercing, unforgiving slate grey. He didn't look like a grieving relative, he looked like a general surveying a battlefield. Two massive men stood outside the glass doors of the ICU room, their backs to the corridor, effectively barricading the entrance. "Who are you?" Clara asked, instinctively, standing up and placing herself between the man and the girl's bed. The man's gaze slowly shifted from the girl's sleeping face to Clara. The weight of his stare was suffocating. "I am Dominic Moretti," he said. His voice was a low, smooth baritone, carrying the faint, raspy edge of someone who commanded absolute authority. "And this is my sister, Sophia." Clara's blood ran cold. Moretti. Even a nurse working 90-hour weeks in Chicago knew that name. The Moretti syndicate controlled the city's ports, its underground casinos, and a vast, shadowy empire of import-export businesses. Dominic Moretti wasn't just a businessman, he was the undisputed king of the Chicago underworld. He was a phantom, a rumor, a ghost that the feds had been trying to nail for a decade without success. And she had just saved his sister. "She's stable," Clara managed to say, forcing her voice to remain professional. "The bullet tore the subclavian artery, but we repaired it. She needs rest." Dominic stepped closer. He smelt of rain, expensive leather, and Tom Ford oud wood. He towered over Clara, but to her own surprise, she didn't back down. "The surgeon told me what happened," Dominic said, his eyes narrowing as he studied her face. He said a nurse bypassed hospital protocol, performed a field thoracostomy, and saved her life before he even arrived. He paused, taking a step closer until he was mere inches from Clara. "That was you." "I did my job, Mr. Moretti," Clara said evenly. "People who do their job let girls like my sister bleed out while they wait for authorization," Dominic countered softly. He reached into his breast pocket and withdrew a slim, leather checkbook. He clicked a Mont Blanc pen and quickly scribbled on a blank check drawn from a Chase private client account. He tore it out and held it toward her. Clara glanced at it. The amount was left blank. "Fill it in," Dominic commanded. "Whatever you want. A new house, a new car, early retirement. Consider it a down payment on my gratitude." Clara looked from the check to Dominic's impassive face. Her mind screamed at her to take it. With a few strokes of a pen, she could pay off her mother's facility for the rest of her life. She could clear her nursing school debt. She could sleep. But taking money from a mafia boss wasn't a gift, it was a leash. "I don't want your money," Clara said, her voice shaking slightly, though she maintained eye contact. "I am a nurse. I save lives because that is what I took an oath to do, not for a bounty." For the first time, a flicker of genuine emotion crossed Dominic Moretti's stoic face. It was a flash of pure, unadulterated surprise, quickly masked by cold calculation. He slowly lowered the check. "Nobody refuses me, miss." He glanced at her ID badge. "Higgins. It is dangerous to owe a debt, but it is equally dangerous to leave a Moretti feeling indebted to you." "Then donate to the hospital's pediatric ward," Clara replied, turning back to check Sophia's IV line. "We're done here, Mr. Moretti. Visiting hours are over, and your sister needs to sleep. I suggest you let her." Silence hung heavy in the room. Clara could feel his eyes boring into her back. For a terrifying second, she wondered if he would signal his men to drag her out. Instead, she heard the soft rustle of fabric. "We are far from done, Clara," Dominic said softly. When she turned around, the room was empty. The blank check was sitting on the rolling tray table beside the bed. 48 hours later, Clara's life systematically fell apart. It started with a call from the hospital administration. Clara was summoned to the chief of staff's office, a plush room overlooking the Chicago skyline that she had never been invited into before. Doctor Harrison sat in the corner, looking intensely uncomfortable, while the chief administrative officer, a stern woman named Beatrice, slid a manila folder across the mahogany desk. "Miss Higgins, we are terminating your employment at Rush Medical Center. Effective immediately, Beatrice said, her tone devoid of any warmth. Clara stared at her, the words failing to compute. Terminating? Why? I just saved a patient's life 2 nights ago. Dr. Harrison commended me. Dr. Harrison cleared his throat, unable to meet her eyes. Clara, the board has been under immense pressure. The police informed us that the drive-by shooting involving your patient, Sofia Moretti, was orchestrated by the Volkov Bratva, the Russian syndicate. What does that have to do with me? Clara demanded, her heart hammering against her ribs. The Volkovs have eyes everywhere, Beatrice interjected smoothly. Word got out that a specific nurse intervened and kept the Moretti girl alive. You are now a liability to this hospital. We cannot risk a retaliatory attack on our premises. Because you are on the staff, it's a matter of institutional security. You're firing me because I did my job too well? Clara's voice cracked. My mother has Alzheimer's. If I lose my health insurance, if I lose my paycheck, she'll be put out on the street. We have provided 2 months of severance, Beatrice said, standing up to signal the end of the meeting. I suggest you leave quietly, Miss Higgins, for your own safety. Numb and disoriented, Clara packed her locker in the basement. The severance pay wouldn't even cover 1 month of her mother's care plus rent. She walked out into the damp, chilly evening air of the hospital parking garage, clutching her cardboard box of belongings. The concrete structure was dim, illuminated by flickering, yellow sodium lights. As she reached into her pocket for her car keys, an imposing shadow detached itself from the concrete pillar next to her beat-up Honda Civic. Clara gasped, dropping her box. Medical tapes, a stethoscope, and loose pens scattered across the oil-stained pavement. You should have taken the check. A smooth, dark voice echoed in the empty garage. Dominic Moretti stepped into the light. He was wearing a tailored black overcoat, a silk scarf knotted at his throat. He looked perfectly at ease in the gritty parking structure, a predator in his natural habitat. Behind him, a black Mercedes-Benz G-Class SUV idled silently, its tinted windows hiding the muscle inside. Did you do this? Clara asked, anger instantly replacing her fear. She pointed a trembling finger at him. Did you have me fired? I don't waste my time managing hospital payrolls, Clara, Dominic said, walking slowly toward her. He crouched down, his expensive leather shoes resting on the filthy concrete, and picked up her stethoscope, handing it back to her. The Volkovs applied pressure on a state senator who sits on the hospital board. They want Sofia dead, and they are displeased with the woman who interfered. So, what? I'm collateral damage in your gang war? Clara snapped, snatching the stethoscope from his hand. You are in danger, Dominic corrected, his grey eyes locking onto hers. And Sofia is not safe at Rush. The Volkovs will send someone to finish the job, and hospital security won't stop them. He stood up, towering over her. I am moving Sofia to my estate in the Gold Coast tonight. I have outfitted a wing of the house with state-of-the-art medical equipment. It is essentially a private ICU, but she needs around-the-clock specialized care. She needs a nurse who doesn't panic under pressure. No, Clara backed away, shaking her head. Absolutely not. I am not getting involved with the Mafia. You are already involved, Clara, Dominic said, his voice dropping an octave, wrapping around her like velvet and steel. The Volkovs know your name. They know what you look like. If you go back to your apartment tonight, you might not wake up tomorrow. If you go to the police, you will end up in a witness protection program that will ship you to Iowa. And your mother. He paused, letting the silence hang. Your mother will be left behind at Sunrise Senior Living, alone, until her funds run out in 3 weeks. Clara's breath hitched. How do you know about my mother? I know everything about the people who hold my sister's life in their hands, Dominic said simply. Work for me. Be Sofia's private nurse until she is fully recovered. In exchange, you will live at my estate under the protection of my men. I will pay off your mother's facility in full for the rest of her life, in advance, and I will ensure the Volkovs never touch a hair on your head. It was a deal with the devil. But as Clara looked into Dominic's unreadable eyes, she realized she was entirely out of options. The hospital had abandoned her. The police couldn't protect her. And the thought of her mother, confused and alone, being evicted onto the streets of Chicago broke her heart. I only answer to Sofia, Clara said, her voice shaking but her chin held high. I am her nurse. Not your employee, not your servant. A ghost of a smirk played at the corner of Dominic's lips. Understood. 2 hours later, Clara was sitting in the back of the armored G-Class, passing through the massive wrought iron gates of an Astor Street mansion. The estate was a fortress disguised as a historic luxury home, swarming with men in dark suits. Clara was immediately escorted to the West Wing. It was astonishing. Dominic had somehow replicated a high-end hospital room, complete with an advanced ventilator, telemetry monitors, and a fully stocked pharmaceutical cabinet. Sophia lay in the center of the room, still unconscious, looking like a porcelain doll amidst the machinery. "Get settled," Dominic said from the doorway, his presence filling the room. "My underboss, Silvio, will brief you on the security protocols. Do not leave this wing without an escort." Clara didn't reply, already moving towards Sophia to check her vitals. She spent the next hour organizing the medications and reviewing the digital chart Dominic had somehow procured from the hospital servers. As she was moving a stack of sterile gauze onto a side table, a thick, leather-bound folder caught her eye. It had been left carelessly on a chair, likely by one of Dominic's men who had helped set up the room. The word confidential was stamped on the front. Curiosity overrode her better judgment. Clara flipped the folder open. It was a private investigator's file detailing the shooting on the Dan Ryan Expressway. There were crime scene photos, witness statements, and a ballistics report. Clara's eyes scanned the technical jargon of the ballistics page. She wasn't a forensic expert, but having worked in Chicago trauma centers, she knew her way around gunshot wounds. The report stated that the bullet pulled from the driver of the SUV who had died at the scene was a standard 7.62 millimeters, typical of an AK-47, the Volkov Bratva's weapon of choice. But the bullet pulled from Sophia's shoulder, the one Dr. Harrison had extracted and handed over to the police, was completely different. Clara read the line 3 times, her blood turning to ice. Item 4B, projectile recovered from victim S. Moretti. 9mm Luger, specialized federal premium Hydra shock hollow point. Clara dropped the file on the table. She remembered Dominic's men in the ER. She remembered the heavy shoulder holsters. The Volkovs hadn't shot Sophia. The precision of a 9mm Hydra shock wasn't the spray-and-pray tactic of a highway drive-by. It was an assassination round, used by high-end private security, used by the outfit. Sophia hadn't been caught in the crossfire of a rival gang. She had been shot by someone inside her own brother's empire. And Clara was now locked inside a fortress with the very people who wanted her patient dead. Clara's heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. The stark black text of the ballistics report burned into her retinas. 9mm Luger, federal premium Hydra shock, an assassin's bullet, an inside job. The heavy brass handle of the oak door began to turn. Panic, sharp and metallic, tasted like copper in Clara's mouth. She shoved the thick leather folder onto the bottom shelf of the stainless steel medical cart, kicking a box of sterile surgical gloves over it just as the door swung open. "Miss Higgins," a voice rasped. Clara spun around, her hand instinctively flying to her throat. Standing in the doorway was Silvio, Dominic's underboss. He was a lean, wiry man in a tailored Ermenegildo Zegna suit that draped elegantly over his predatory frame. Unlike Dominic's cold, statuesque authority, Silvio radiated a nervous, kinetic energy. His eyes, the color of dirty ice, scanned the room with terrifying precision before settling on Clara. "Silvio," Clara managed to say, forcing her voice to remain steady. She turned back to the telemetry monitor, pretending to check Sophia's blood pressure. "You startled me." "My apologies," Silvio said, stepping fully into the room. The heavy door clicked shut behind him, sealing them in the pressurized silence of the makeshift ICU. He walked slowly toward the bed, his gaze lingering on the rhythmic rise and fall of Sophia's chest. "The boss wanted me to check on the progress. Is the girl gonna wake up?" There was something in his tone, a subtle, calculated detachment. He didn't ask how his boss's sister was feeling. He asked if she was going to wake up. "She is heavily sedated on a propofol drip to allow the lung tissue to heal," Clara lied smoothly, drawing on years of dealing with pushy relatives in the trauma ward. In truth, Clara had begun weaning Sophia off the sedation an hour ago. The girl's vitals were strong enough to attempt extubation by morning. It could be days before she regains consciousness. Her body went through immense trauma. Silvio's jaw ticked. He reached out, his manicured fingers brushing against the plastic tubing of the Plurivac draining fluid from Sophia's chest. "It's a tragedy. The Volkovs are animals. Shooting a young girl on the Dan Ryan. They lack refinement." Clara watched his hands. He was too close to the life support machines. Mr. Moretti instituted strict infection control protocols for this wing. Silvio. I have to ask you to step back from the sterile field. Silvio paused, his eyes flicking to Clara. A slow, utterly devoid of warmth smile stretched across his face. Of course, Nurse Higgins. We wouldn't want any complications. He gave Sophia one last, lingering look before turning on his heel and exiting the room. Clara let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding, her knees trembling so violently she had to grip the edge of the mattress to stay upright. Was it Silvio? He had the access. He had the authority. But why would Dominic's right-hand man try to murder the boss's sister? The mansion grew eerily quiet as midnight approached. The relentless rain of Chicago beat against the reinforced glass of the Astor Street estate. Clara sat in the dim lighting of the room, reviewing the digital charts on an iPad, her mind racing through 100 different terrifying scenarios. She needed to tell Dominic about the ballistics report, but who could she trust? If she went to Dominic and Silvio intercepted her, she would be dead before she reached the grand staircase. You should be sleeping. A deep, quiet voice broke the silence. Clara gasped, dropping the iPad onto her lap. Dominic stood in the shadows near the doorway. He had shed his bespoke suit jacket and tie. He wore a simple, dark charcoal Henley that stretched tight across his broad chest, a leather shoulder holster conspicuously absent. He looked exhausted, the harsh lines of his face softened by fatigue. I have a patient, Clara said, her heart doing a strange, unexpected flutter. Nurses don't sleep on shift. Dominic stepped into the soft pool of light beside the bed. He looked down at his sister, gently brushing a stray lock of dark hair from her pale forehead. The gesture was so tender, so entirely human, that it caught Clara off guard. This was the man the FBI called the Butcher of the Gold Coast. She looks peaceful, Dominic murmured. She hasn't looked peaceful since our mother died. He turned his slate-grey eyes to Clara. You look like you are about to shatter, Clara. Your hands are shaking. Clara quickly folded her hands in her lap. It's just the adrenaline and the cold. Dominic studied her for a long moment, a master at reading the micro-expressions of liars and thieves. He walked over to a small mahogany cabinet in the corner of the room, opened it, and poured 2 fingers of amber liquid into a crystal tumbler. He walked back and offered it to her. Macallan 18. Drink it. It will calm your nerves. Clara hesitated, then took the heavy glass. Their fingers brushed. His skin was warm, calloused, grounding. She took a sip, the single malt, burning a fiery, comforting trail down her throat. Why did you bring me here, Dominic? Clara asked softly, the whiskey loosening her tongue. You have the money to hire a dozen private doctors. Why force a disgraced ER nurse into your home? Dominic leaned against the wall, crossing his arms. Doctors who work for money are easily bought. A doctor can be bribed to look the other way, to administer the wrong dosage, to let an infection spread. His gaze darkened. You, Clara, refused a blank check. You fought me to protect a girl you didn't even know. You cannot be bought. That makes you the most dangerous person in this house to my enemies, and the safest person for my sister. Clara swallowed hard, the weight of the hidden ballistics folder pressing against her conscience. He trusted her. He was opening his fortress to her because she had shown integrity. Dominic, Clara started, her voice barely a whisper. She looked at the door, terrified Sylvia was listening. There is something you need to know about the shooting. Something the police. A sharp, high-pitched alarm sliced through the quiet room. Sophia's heart monitor was flashing red. Her heart rate was skyrocketing, her body beginning to thrash against the sheet. She's waking up, Clara said, instantly slamming the glass down and rushing to the bed. The breathing tube is irritating her trachea. She's fighting the ventilator. Dominic stepped forward, his eyes wide. What do you need? Hold her shoulders down. Don't let her pull the IVs, Clara ordered, completely forgetting who she was commanding. Dominic didn't hesitate. He pinned his sister's shoulders with firm, gentle strength, while Clara grabbed a syringe, preparing to push a microdose of fentanyl to ease the transition, grabbing the Yankauer suction to clear her airway. As Clara worked, she looked at Dominic. His eyes were wide with a fear he never showed to the underworld. In that chaotic moment, amidst the alarms and the tangled wires, Clara made a silent vow. She was going to protect this family, whatever it took. By 3 a.m., the crisis had passed. Clara had successfully extubated Sophia. The thick plastic tube was gone, replaced by a simple nasal cannula delivering oxygen. Sophia's eyes were open, bleary, unfocused, and terrified. Dominic had been forced to leave the room an hour prior to take an emergency call from one of his capos regarding a shipment at the port of Chicago, leaving Clara alone with the recovering girl and a heavily armed guard named Matteo stationed outside the door. Clara dimmed the lights and leaned over the bed. "Sophia," she whispered, gently squeezing the girl's cold, clammy hand. "Can you hear me? You're safe. You're at home." Sophia blinked, her pale lips parting. She tried to speak, but only a dry, rattling hiss escaped. Clara quickly grabbed a sponge swab, dipped it in ice water, and moistened Sophia's lips. "Take your time," Clara soothed. "Your brother is here. He's keeping you safe." At the mention of her brother, Sophia's eyes widened in sheer panic. Her grip on Clara's hand suddenly tightened with surprising strength. The heart monitor began to beat faster. "No," Sophia rasped, her voice sounding like crushed gravel. "Dom. Danger." "Dominic is safe," Clara assured her, stroking her hair. "The Volkovs can't get you here." Tears spilled over Sophia's eyelashes, tracking down her pale cheeks. She violently shook her head, wincing in agony as the movement pulled at her sutured chest. Not Russians. Not Volkov. Clara froze. The ballistics report flashed in her mind. 9mm Hydroshock. "Sophia," Clara whispered, leaning in so close her lips brushed the girl's ear. "Who shot you?" Sophia swallowed hard, her chest heaving. "Silvia." The name dropped like an anvil in the quiet room. "I was in the car," Sophia gasped out, each word costing her immense effort. "Driver went into the gas station. Silvio was in the passenger seat. He got a call on a burner. Spoke Russian. He told them where we were." Sophia squeezed her eyes shut, reliving the nightmare. "He told Yuri Volkov to hit the car on the expressway. Said he would make sure Dom's loyalists were dead." Clara's blood ran colder than ice. Silvio had brokered a deal with the Bratva to wipe out Dominic's inner circle, likely to seize control of the Chicago outfit himself. When the shooting started, Sophia choked out, a sob racking her fragile frame. The driver died instantly. Silvio turned around. He saw that I heard him on the phone. He pulled his own gun. "He shot me." "Oh, my God," Clara breathed, horror washing over her. The attack on the highway was just a smokescreen. Silvio had tried to execute the only witness to his treason. "You have to tell Dom," Sophia pleaded, her grip failing as exhaustion overtook her. "Silvio controls the house guards. Dom doesn't know." Before Clara could respond, the heavy oak door clicked open. Clara snapped upright. Matteo, the loyal guard, was gone. Standing in his place was Silvio. He had shed his suit jacket. In his right hand, resting casually against his thigh, was a matte black Glock 19 equipped with a suppressor. He stepped into the room and locked the door behind him with a sickening click. "I knew the propofol drip was too low," Silvio murmured, his dead eyes locking onto Sophia, who was now trembling uncontrollably on the bed. "You nurses think you know everything. Get out," Clara demanded, stepping squarely between Silvio and the bed. Her heart was beating so fast she thought it might rupture, but the protective instincts that had driven her entire life took over. She grabbed a heavy metal oxygen tank wrench from the bedside table, hiding it behind her back. "Nothing personal, Clara," Silvio said, raising the suppressed pistol. "You're a brilliant nurse, but you're standing in the way of progress. The Moretti era is over. The Volkovs offer a much better profit margin on the ports." "Dominic will kill you," Clara said, her voice eerily calm. "Dominic is currently in the library, completely isolated, waiting for a secure satellite call that I orchestrated." Silvio smirked. "By the time he hears anything, you and the girl will have succumbed to a tragic secondary infection, or perhaps a sudden, fatal embolism." Silvio took a step forward, aiming the barrel directly at Clara's chest. "Move." "No." Silvio's finger tightened on the trigger. Crash. The heavy oak door didn't just open, it exploded inward, the reinforced frame splintering like matchsticks. Before Silvio could even turn his head, a massive, dark blur slammed into him. The suppressed Glock fired, the bullet thudding harmlessly into the ceiling plaster with a muffled thwip. Dominic Moretti drove Silvio into the wall with the force of a freight train. The drywall cracked under the impact. Dominic's left hand was wrapped around Silvio's throat, lifting the traitor entirely off the ground, while his right hand pressed the barrel of a polished silver 1911 pistol directly into Silvio's temple. Dominic's eyes were no longer the calm, slate grey of a businessman. They were the terrifying, abyssal black of a killer. "Boss," Silvio choked out, his legs kicking wildly in the air, dropping his gun. The nurse, she tried to kill Sophia. I was stopping her." Dominic didn't even blink. He looked over his shoulder at Clara. She was still standing defensively over Sophia, shaking like a leaf, the heavy wrench clutched in her hands. "Clara," Dominic's voice was a low, dangerous rumble that vibrated through the floorboards. "Tell me what is happening in my house." Clara dropped the wrench. She reached under the medical cart, pulled out the thick leather folder, and tossed it onto the floor at Dominic's feet. "The ballistics report," Clara said, her voice finally breaking. Sophia wasn't shot by the Russians' AK-47. She was shot with a 9mm Hydroshock. Dominic's gaze flicked to the suppressed Glock lying on the floor. A 9mm. He looked back at Silvio, the realization dawning with terrifying clarity. From the bed, Sophia let out a weak, ragged cry. "Dom, he sold us out. He shot me." The temperature in the room plummeted to absolute zero. The silence that followed was heavier than death itself. Dominic slowly turned his attention back to the man, pinned against the wall, the underboss who had eaten at his table, who had sworn a blood oath to his family. "Dominic, please," Silvio begged. A wet, pathetic sound. "We can make a deal." "Take my sister's name out of your mouth," Dominic whispered. Dominic did not raise his voice. He didn't have to. The terrifying, absolute stillness of his posture spoke louder than a gunshot. With a brutal, swift motion, he struck Silvio across the temple with the heavy steel barrel of the 1911. Silvio collapsed like a marionette with its strings cut, hitting the hardwood floor with a dull thud. Dominic didn't spare the unconscious traitor a second glance. He stepped into the hallway and whistled, a short, sharp sound. Within seconds, heavy footsteps thundered up the stairs. Matteo, rubbing a bloody gash on the back of his head where Silvio had evidently ambushed him, burst into the room flanked by 3 other heavily armed loyalists. "Get this garbage out of my house," Dominic ordered, his voice echoing with lethal finality. "Take him to the warehouse at the docks. He will explain his arrangement with Yuri Volkov in detail. Then you will send the Volkovs his remains. Let them know the Moretti family has been cleansed." Matteo nodded grimly, hauling Silvio up by his lapels and dragging him out of the makeshift medical wing. As the door clicked shut, the oppressive, violent energy drained from the room, leaving behind the steady, rhythmic beeping of Sophia's heart monitor. Dominic slowly holstered his weapon. He turned to the bed, dropping to one knee beside his sister. He pressed his forehead against her hand, his broad shoulders rising and falling in a shaky breath. "I'm sorry, Sorelina," Dominic whispered, the ruthless mob boss, completely dissolving into a terrified older brother. "I brought the Viper into our home. I almost lost you." Sophia managed a weak, exhausted smile, her fingers brushing against his dark hair. "You didn't lose me, Dom." She didn't let him. Sophia's eyes fluttered shut as the adrenaline faded, pulling her back into a deep, restorative sleep. Dominic stood slowly, turning his slate-grey gaze upon Clara. Clara was still backed against the medical cart, her hands gripping the edge of the stainless steel so tightly her knuckles were stark white. She was a civilian, a woman who spent her life healing, abruptly thrust into a world of assassins and syndicates. Yet, she had not broken. Dominic closed the distance between them in 3 long strides. He stopped mere inches from her, the scent of rain, gunpowder, and oud wood enveloping her senses. Slowly, he reached out. His large, calloused hands that ordered empires and ended lives, gently wrapped around her trembling wrists, prying her fingers away from the metal cart. "You stood between a loaded, suppressed weapon and my sister," Dominic said, his voice a gravelly murmur. "You had a wrench. He had a Glock. Why?" "I took an oath," Clara breathed, looking up into his eyes. The fear was melting away, replaced by a sudden, intense heat that pooled in her stomach. "And I knew you were coming." Dominic's breath hitched. He reached up, his thumb tracing the soft curve of her jawline, wiping away a stray tear she hadn't realized had fallen. "I offered you a blank check to leave, Clara Higgins. I offered you the world to walk away. But you stayed. You fought for my blood as if it were your own." He leaned in, the dangerous, intoxicating proximity making Clara's heart race faster than the telemetry monitors could track. "You are no longer just a nurse in my employ," Dominic murmured, his lips brushing against hers with every word. "You are under my protection. You are mine to keep." When his lips finally captured hers, it wasn't the forceful kiss of a tyrant. It was a surrender. Clara melted against his solid chest, her hands tangling in his dark hair, answering the desperate, profound need of a man who lived in the shadows but had finally found the light. Asterisk. The debt erased. The following morning, Clara received a notification that her mother's account at Sunrise Senior Living had been paid in full for the next 20 years, complete with a private suite upgrade. Asterisk. The syndicate secured, the Volkov Bratva, terrified by the gruesome message delivered to their doorstep, retreated from the port territories, cementing Dominic's undisputed reign. Asterisk. The royal court Clara did not return to the grueling shifts at Rush Memorial. She remained at the Astor Street estate, officially as Sophia's head of medical recovery, but unofficially as the only woman who could command the King of Chicago without saying a word. Blood brought Clara Higgins into the underworld, but courage kept her there. She had walked into a trauma room trying to pay a debt, only to earn the fierce loyalty of Chicago's most dangerous king. Dominic Moretti found the savior of his family not in his ranks, but in the fierce heart of a nurse who proved that true power doesn't wield a gun, but a healing touch.